I wish you could have heard it, that unmistakable sound of heels striking the smooth marble floor, one resolute step followed by another. It was the way I chose to announce my arrival. The initial hesitation soon manifested itself into a newfound voice, marked by my remarkable assertion. I had found my stride. The sound echoed through the grand hall of the post office until it eventually faded into the everyday murmur as I took my place in line. Even well after my approach, I noticed all the glances and stares my way. Was it the striking sound of my heels that had their attention? The more I thought about it, and based on my experiences today, the more I welcomed the idea that their regard was more than just that. Some heels naturally turn heads. Mine did even earlier today as I sauntered down the block, about to cross paths with a couple of teenagers. Of course I had their attention with their obvious staring. I took note of one boy whose eyes were all over my heels. It was a pleasure to get any attention at all. Then I peeked back and caught him looking with dead-set eyes and a gaping mouth. It didn't stop there. Later, a gentleman gave me his seat on the subway. I sat there exposed from the thighs down, loving the experience of my smoothly shaven legs enclosed within sheer nylons. Every time I'd cross my legs, I'd catch another clinging eye. I started a tally in my head, how many undeniable looks would I get, but I eventually lost track of the count. Stop after stop, with so many passengers coming and going, I certainly wasn't the only one enjoying myself. Now, as I wait here in line at the post office, with my purse dangling by my side, wearing my favorite black dress, the type that leaves very little room for the imagination, a man walks in and is headed in M direction. Clearly he's not shy in his certain fixation, and maybe that's the cause for me to go out of my usual character by casually fluffing my skirts. I'd never dare flirt with a guy, and I was really only making sure my dress was hanging right, but I couldn't deny my instinct for something else. He was close enough to hear the rustling whisper, that crinkling sound only a petticoat could make, and in this case it was organza. Maybe he caught a glimpse, a brief flash of lace underneath, almost certain to peek out. Here I was, flirting, and I hadn't even said a word. In a way, I've been blessed. I possess a body made for very feminine outfits such as this one, and it was such a waste to always dress so discreetly before. It was remarkable how my unassuming and meek body for a guy could easily be transformed into a woman of breathtaking elegance. I didn't even need to bother with breast forms, because I can easily pass as a flat-chested girl. I felt like I had superpowers now that I was dressed up. Yet, despite the fact I was here in the city, proudly standing in line, displayed in my best, I still lacked an outright confidence. The truth? I inherited a guy's face. I couldn't deny it, and feminine styling and makeup could only go so far. After getting myself made up today, I saw how it looked like I was at odds with my features, or how my features were betraying the feminine look I sought after. Either way, my face remained my Achilles heel. So many ventures in the past turned down out of apprehension. But you might ask, why the sudden change? Why do I seem to carry more poise today, more than I had in the past? The answer? The COVID pandemic. The lockdown and the continued regulations, and that face which I couldn't quite hide before, was now mostly hidden behind a mask. A mask I was pressured to wear. A blessing in disguise, indeed. Just as one headed for the exit, another person took their place at the window. I was making my last stop to deliver some mail, and then I could do whatever I wanted in the city. It was spring, the time of year you get that special feeling in the air, of verdant liveliness, especially after being in hibernation mode for so long, forever waiting for the weather to improve. I made a big step today. I had on my best dress, and instead of just cross-dressing at home, I chose to make this special outing. To my surprise, the arduous experience I was fearing was not the case after all, for this truly felt special, and I was relishing every moment of it. Another person headed toward the next available window, and I stepped forward and sighed with relief. Just as I thought to myself, "I'm next," it happened. My legs tensed up first. I clutched anxiously at my purse. A familiar-looking person had entered and headed in my direction. Already a knot burned at the pit of my stomach. Even here in the city, amongst a sea of people, what was the chance of running into someone I knew? That unmistakable red hair. I knew who it was. I cursed my decision to choose this post office, the one that happened to be near where I used to work. I even passed on going to my local post office, specifically because I wanted to avoid running into anyone I knew. My fears were confirmed as she got in line. With bright curly red hair like that, I knew it was Kathy, my former office manager. She stood at the back of the line, but its turn back meant I stood just over to the side, just about facing her. I avoided any eye contact and looked straight ahead, wondering why she wasn't working remotely. And she had to be here, mailing something now? The line moved and she was now further behind me a bit. I made the slightest peek her way. She was occupied, with her phone poised in her hands. She sure had a chance to get a good look, but could she even recognize me? I had to be in the clear, I felt. A person left a window. I was next, and with great relief I made my way there. I handed over my mail, postage was determined, and I paid. When I left, I didn't dare look back at the line. I clip-clopped like a racehorse in my haste to the exit. All I wanted was to get outside, find a park, any park, as long as it was someplace else. I had enough running into people for one day, but before I could even pass through the exit I came to an abrupt halt. It must have just started raining and I didn't have an umbrella. I even knew that there was a chance for rain, because I read it on my phone on the subway ride here. I even remembered how I repeated the word umbrella over and over again. I was so worried I might get caught out somewhere, and told myself to purchase one first thing when I arrived in the city. Of course, my mind just so happened to shift its focus back to the warm and pleasant spring weather when I stepped outside again, and sure enough, I forgot all about that very important word. I took a quick look around, hoping someone accidentally had left one somewhere. Of course, no one had. That would be too convenient. I discarded the idea of heading to a nearby store or stand because the rain was much more than a drizzle by now and was definitely not letting up. I was trapped. I held on to the hope that if the rain happened so quickly it would let up just as fast. I stood facing out one of the large windows positioned over a bit from the exit door. From there I had a great view out front, and also allowed me to see Kathy exit while most importantly remain out of the way. I retrieved my phone from my purse and checked the weather again. I could see it was only a passing rain shower. That was it. I looked out again. A person dashed their way down the soaked sidewalk as cars passed by with tires spraying the rain back up from the pavement. I had a moment of comfort standing there inside while feeling so dry. I laughed to myself knowing that waiting here a little wasn't the worst thing in the world. Suddenly, I heard someone behind me. "Hi there." "Excuse me?" My body tensed upon recognizing the familiar voice. I took a moment to compose myself and then began my slow swivel towards her. "Hi. I couldn't help noticing you standing over here," Kathy said once she had my uneasy attention. "I bet you forgot something, right?" I was steadying myself, or more correctly wavering about looking like I never stood in high heels before. I didn't even answer her because all I could think about was that I was standing before my former coworker wearing a fancy dress and heels and we were about to have a conversation. While I was waiting in line, I remembered that I had grabbed this. She held up an umbrella. Which is funny because I already had another one in my bag. We have plenty more back at the office. She extended it towards me. Please go ahead. Thank you, I said as I demurely held onto it. She released her grip. Don't worry. It's yours now. It was troubling that I had to speak, and my goal was to keep it as brief as possible. I also decided to use a higher-pitched, feminine expression to help disguise my familiar voice, while also keeping in line with my outfit. I hardly practiced speaking like this much, but my hope was that our conversation wouldn't last much longer. I studied her deep green eyes and thought, could she even recognize me? The outfit made it look like I was ready for a night out on the town, so her identifying me as her former employee was surely the last thing on her mind. I was just a stranger to her, and I wanted to keep it that way. I hoped that she would have left already, but instead she pointed out the window. This weather reminds me of my daughter's wedding day. I turned to look out at the rain falling. She walked up and stood beside me and continued. You should have seen it. Clear skies and blue all morning with all the festivities in order, everyone dressed up, even myself, at least the best I could muster. And then a sudden downpour. It happened right before the ceremony. They quickly used a tablecloth as a canopy. My daughter would have a fit if anything happened to her cherished wedding dress. They guided her inside, and we had to quickly reorganize everything there. All of us were packed into the tight space, and most couldn't even get a great view of her during the ceremony. My daughter was so upset. I kept looking out the window, thinking of how nice it was earlier. She placed her hand on the window, as beads of rain trickled down the other side. It happened so suddenly, just like you see here. I remember hearing her tell this story before. I was hoping she'd finish already so we could say our goodbyes and leave. I felt unprepared to have to deal with this. Especially having a conversation with someone. I was about to tell her I had to go, but there were her eyes again peering into mine. I felt like a shop window dummy standing there silent in front of her, so in response I voiced my frustration about being so distracted earlier and even knowing that there was a chance for rain. I stumbled on my words, and became more worried as I felt my voice wasn't feminine sounding enough. But after going on further, I realized I may have now over-exaggerated. I decided I had said enough, and let my voice trail off on my last sentence. I didn't want to do anything more that could reveal myself. With her mask on, I struggled to pick up on her facial expressions. It was only the green of her eyes I could read. The familiarity of them gave off a look like they were testing me, like she knew who I was and was just waiting for me to fess up. Even so, there was no way I was going to reveal myself. After Kathy had sympathized with my situation, she stepped back. I felt relief realizing that this was her farewell. She gave me a good look up and down. I have to say, you look rather stunning. Kathy gestured to her outfit. I wish I could say the same about my drab self. I mean, I never go out of my way ever. I mean, you should see my wardrobe at home. Certainly no outfits like yours. But this is the way I always liked it. Strictly business. I took note of her basic flats, climbed the rigidness of her dark slacks, and rose along her no-nonsense button-down white shirt. The culmination on top was that fiery red hair of hers, and awaiting me beneath her deep green eyes. They met with mine, those same eyes, peering out from above her mask. The green of them saying go. I know. Go on. Tell me. I stood there in silence trying to come up with a response. I think it suits you, I said, the words falling out of my mouth. It sounded like I really had no clue. Thanks, she replied. But I really do need to look into some other places instead of frequenting the same old stores. Like that dress of yours. Where would you come across something like that? I wanted to get the conversation back to the weather, but we already did that, so I had no choice now but to discuss my outfit. I told the truth, and while doing so remembered to keep up my feigned voice, the same one I had already established. I also made sure to keep my responses brief. I saw it at a consignment shop. Oh really? Which one? It's one downtown. It's called Sophie's. I'd tell you that I'd look into it, swing by, but I'm not sure of the last time I've been inside a consignment shop. Since I knew Kathy, the question should have been, has she ever been in one, but she didn't expect me to answer. She continued her questions, recognizing by now that I wasn't the chatty type. So is this a place? Is it somewhere you go to often? Actually, not so much. Most of the items are out of my price range. But a price range you could afford, she said as she stood there sizing up my outfit. Look at you, you're wearing the dress. I know, right? They mostly carry high-end, designer ones. I usually just browse the racks, but when I came across this one dash. Oh, so when you had your sights on? Kathy chimed in. Well, yeah. I checked the brand name on the tag, and I couldn't believe it. One you really liked? Loved. At last I came across a dress by Sasha's Opulence. Oh, of course. She laughed, knowingly ignorant of the brand, and I laughed heartily along with her, but I inadvertently revealed the true underlying baritone in my voice. After we settled down, Kathy asked, "But how'd you get around the cost?" I looked down at my dress. I was about to fluff at its skirts and then stopped myself. In a way, our conversation had loosened me up some. I looked back up at her. Oh my God! It was way too much. But it was on the top of my wish list. Well, it looks like you somehow could afford it. Or maybe you were lucky to have someone else to help with the purchase. Oh no, I paid for it myself, I quickly inserted. Judging by how much I can tell you like it, I'd say it was worth it. I firmly agreed and uttered my response with such gaiety. When I heard about how warm it would be today, my decision was made. I just had to wear this dress. I mean, I really couldn't help myself. I couldn't believe I just had this long of a conversation with Kathy so far. We had a moment of silence, but I spoke enough, worried I may have given myself away, so as patiently as I could, I waited for her to speak again, or even better, to leave. Really? She asked, while maintaining eye contact, and I struggled to see if she had any recognition in her eyes. She likely picked up on the fact that I was a guy by now, but that was fine, as long as she didn't know it was me. I asked for clarification. Really, what? The weather can't be the only reason to wear your dress? What do you mean? Well, given your fancy outfit, I assume you have something special lined up for later. What could it be? A nice event somewhere? Or I know. A date? I stood still, but inside I was squirming about and kicking myself. The last thing I wanted to do was answer her question. How did I get this far into the conversation? How could I get myself out of this? I'm sorry, I said as I adjusted my mask, lifting it to cover as much face as possible. I never got used to wearing these things, and I'm sure you're having trouble hearing me speak. No, not at all. I hear you just fine. I screwed up. I just realized I had used my regular voice. Then I overcorrected by switching to an excessively effeminate inflection. Oh, okay. I was just making sure. So what I'm doing later is... I trailed off as Kathy nodded, gesturing me to go on already. My fears increased when I had the idea that she recognized a familiar voice. Maybe she already knew it was me and this was some amusing game of hers, teasing me while playing dumb. Please tell. Come on. What's the occasion? She hadn't forgotten her question, nor had she moved on. I glanced about and then settled back on those eyes of hers. The green in them saying go. Go on, tell me already. It was like she hadn't known earlier, but had now figured me out. I didn't dare utter another word, knowing I had already spoken way too much. I tried to see if I could get anything out of her expression, but I didn't have anything I could go off of, only those two eyes of hers. We stood there in silence. My body jerked a little when Kathy asked, "Hello? Is everything okay?" I wasn't okay. In a panic, I turned and looked outside. It was still raining. I looked back. Her green eyes were piercing right through me. My heart was pounding. She wasn't going anywhere. I knew I had gone too far. The severe scrutiny in her eyes said it all. I had given myself away. I wanted a fire alarm to go off, a car accident to happen on the street. I wanted anything else to happen to keep me from doing what I was worried I was about to do. I repeated in my head, telling myself, do not give yourself away. Her green eyes said go. Go on, tell me. The eyes were too knowing. She had figured me out for sure. I couldn't bear it any longer. I closed my eyes and repeated do not give yourself away in my head. I prayed that she'd somehow just disappear upon me opening them again. I received her knowing eyes once more, and at once I sought a resolution to the situation I found myself in. Hi, Kathy. At last I spoke, giving no effort to disguise my voice. I had a moment of instant relief. I sighed and I waited for her to concede, but it didn't last long and my fears weren't alleviated. She still had that same look on her eyes. Wait. Excuse me? Do I know you? Mortification set in as I realized she actually didn't know it was me. She studied my dress and was doing so now, knowing I was a guy. My baritone admission. Me telling her that we know each other. Now the moment I was so hoping to avoid was now upon me. I was smoldering as I stood there, and Kathy eagerly waited for me to clarify myself. You do know me. It's Tim. I could just picture her mouth gaping wide under her mask, with her recognition of me, but her response alarmed me further. Tim? She paused to reflect. Wait. Tim who? Did she really not have a clue? How many ways will I have to spell this out for her? Do I have to pull my mask down to show her? Remember. Tim, from the office. She came up close, staring up into my eyes. Oh my God. Tim from work. The same Tim? She was ecstatic as I nodded. She grasped at my arms almost like she had to test to see if I was real. I had no clue. I mean, how could I have known it was you? It was slowly sinking in. I saw it in her eyes as she examined the entirety of my outfit. This is so different. So unexpected. And look at your hair. It's so cute. I didn't know it curled like that. You always used to have it so short." I had no response as she stepped back to give me another good look up and down. "Wow, Tim. I can't believe it, you really had me fooled." She came up close, held her hand to her heart and spoke to me in a confidential tone. "I never knew this about you. I mean the look you always had, so predictable with the same plain shirts and pants. It was like you always wore the same old outfit all the time." She stepped back and took my new look in. She made a grand gesture with her hands and blurted out, "And now this. I mean also your eagerness to talk with me about shopping earlier. And dresses." My head hung low, observing my outfit, not surprised by her reaction. I looked nothing like the former self. "Wait. What was the shop called again?" she said with a chuckle. "Sophie's. That's right. It's downtown. Maybe the next time I find myself that way I might take a look. I'd ask you for the brand name of the dress again, but I'd never remember it." She laughed, so I laughed along with her. It was better than talking. I mean, wow. You really had me there. But hey, you look great and that's all that matters. Her usual chatty demeanor made itself known now that she knew who I was, so I had to listen to her fill me in on her own COVID situation and experiences over the past few months. She caught me up on work stuff like it was something I really needed to hear. I awkwardly answered her questions about what I have been up to. I went on about different projects, exaggerating my situation because the reality is I've been mostly bumming around. I had to admit I was currently out of work. The truth was I actually shouldn't have even quit my job at the office. It was just one of those rash decisions I've been regretting. You know that we have a surprising amount of new projects. I hate to pressure you, but you should consider coming back to work with us again if you want. I'd certainly consider it. Don't be afraid to let us know. Please. Give us a call. I will. In actuality, I had no plans of going back to work. Especially not now. I was going to have to deal with the repercussions of her letting others know about me. Okay, so they'll know I like to dress up like this, but I had broken all ties with everyone there, so it didn't really bother me too much. We hugged and said our goodbyes. She reached the exit door and turned back toward me. Hey, you didn't answer my question I asked you earlier. I stood there puzzled. Which question was that? The one about your fancy outfit. I assume you must have something special lined up. It was even harder to answer her now, knowing she knew who I was. I didn't dare make up some fancy place or another event somewhere. I was just going to eat in the park. Her roaring laughter echoed across the room. Is that so? I hope you also brought your swimsuit. Since with all this rain, you'll likely be swimming in the park. Or is that why you didn't need an umbrella today? It was a foolish answer, but I was just trying to get this over with. She settled herself and then suggested I come by the office and eat there. It will be nice and dry, she assured me. I'm actually not that hungry anymore, I lied. I'm just going to head home. She stood beside me and held my hand. It's been so quiet in the office due to the lingering COVID situation. I mean, most of the staff is still working remotely. I listened as she guided me towards the door. I bet no one else is even there at this hour. We would likely have the whole place to ourselves. I had my last chance to decline and head home, but I was actually starving, and with great reluctance I said it. Okay, let's go. We headed out the door, our umbrellas opening in tandem before stepping out into the rain together. As we made our way to the office, Kathy caught me up on everything else she hadn't already said earlier. All I could think about was of all the ways I could have avoided this situation. When we finally arrived, the rain suddenly let up. It had been months since I was last in the office, ever since I called it quits and stepped out for good, vowing I'd never return. Yet here I found myself, decked out in a sleek black dress, and that alone is enough to draw attention and incite confusion, not to mention my sheer pantyhose, my cute bouncy hair, and high heels. In a bustling office environment, with people already familiar with me, I'd expect my revelation would beckon utter disbelief, just as it had for Kathy earlier, but the great thing about today, no one else was here. After arriving, Kathy suggested I sit wherever I liked, as she headed over to her usual spot. Being later in the day, and with most employees working remotely due to the ongoing COVID situation, there was plenty of free seating to choose from. Out of habit, I chose my old desk, now assigned to someone else, but I unpacked my lunch there anyway. The exposure I felt after removing my mask concerned me. I hadn't put much makeup on, not wanting it to get messed up, plus I hadn't planned on removing my mask, but how was I supposed to eat, and besides Kathy already knew who I was. Kathy was already on the phone dealing with a client. I sat in silence, half listening as I quietly ate my sandwich, my thoughts still lingering on today's outing, an experience exceeding my highest of expectations. Today, I felt, marked my day of great reckoning, as I discovered a superpower I have, yet always failed to put into practice, the ability to turn heads and attract attention. The impact of today's outfit was undeniable, but equally surprising was both my enjoyment and newfound confidence. Was that the key ingredient I had lacked before? Okay, I have to admit that the mask gets some of the credit. In how it concealed my weakness and allowed me to push my outward display, but in doing so it had inspired something from within. For example, in the past I dressed discreetly and hurried from one place to the next, yielding to apprehension and always anxious to get back home. Yes, anyone I passed could lay eyes on me, but today was different in how I chose to announce myself with a resolute stride while also living up to it. It had been going so smoothly, that is until I had my unexpected encounter with Kathy at the post office. Just like that, a rug was pulled out from underneath where I once stood. I had a tragic death by fall. Or a death by crush, smothered by my own weight. Some might describe it in a less trenchant way, saying that I fell from grace. All I found was my demotion to that unassuming self, one that's always desperate to either cower or flee from the situation I was in. Now, as I glance around the office over to Kathy, still on the phone, and down towards my half-eaten sandwich, the dust has settled a bit since earlier, and I felt ready to turn things around. A sudden thought crossed my mind: what am I doing here? The rain let up. Let me get back out there, while there's still sunlight and pleasant weather, and reclaim that self once again. I should be out there and proudly declaring it. I hastily wrapped up my lunch, stood up, and faced Kathy. My aim was to get myself back to that lofty place I had once occupied. But just as I was about to say goodbye, a noise came from the office door, and to my utter surprise, Maura stepped in. She shut the door and leaned back against it, evidently catching her breath. "Oh wow, people are still here," she remarked upon seeing me. I humbly took a seat and waited, never taking my eyes off her. She wore a cute little outfit combo: a creamy blouse, breezy skirt, and dark tights. Her handbag hung and swiveled off her shoulder, and she still had on her floral-printed mask. She pushed off the door and paced over as if she were about to greet me at once, but instead, she came to a halt and tossed her handbag on a desk. It tumbled to a stop, and then she flung her arms up in the air. "I shouldn't even be here right now," she cried out. It was so careless of me. I remembered that she was at her desk, as she looked around at the contents scattered about. I can't believe I forgot my folders. I really needed them. I even forgot to get all the files ready too. She had been addressing me, but then suddenly froze, as she eyed me. "Oh, hi there," she said, holding her hand up, somewhat aloft. "I'm sorry, I'm Maura." Maura was my crush, the one I fantasized about. I had been working here before she started, and we shared about 2 years together. I liked her from the very first time we met, and that feeling only grew as we worked together. However, I never had the heart to tell her any of this. Many times I wanted to, but even after about 2 years, I didn't follow through. We last spoke to each other remotely on a Zoom call after I had just called it quits. Maura had reached out to me to express how sad she was that I was leaving. She couldn't believe it, as she always thought I'd be running the company one day. Hearing that from her meant a lot to me. It was unexpected, and I yearned to see her after that call, wishing I had gotten to know her better. Yet, I realized I'd likely never see her again. Now, I sat speechless in her presence as Kathy chatted on the phone still. "Hold on a moment," she said, and placed the receiver over her shoulder and responded. "Maura, we have an unannounced guest. You might be in for a little surprise." Kathy returned to her phone call while Maura eyed me attentively, taking one hesitant step after another towards me. I hadn't had time to put my mask back on, and now it was too late to do so. We were meeting again. I felt excited, but I hadn't planned on it being like this. I really wanted to hide underneath the desk. I expected what was coming, thinking she'd spend some time before recognizing me, but before she reached me, she cried out, "Wait! It can't be. Tim?" I was shocked. How could she recognize me so easily? I acknowledged her with a reluctant nod. She stood before me, removed her mask, revealing her beaming smile, and cried out, "Oh my! It really is you." She put her hands to her face. I can't believe it. She was beautiful, especially when she gets excited. The girl I had yearned for was standing before me, but to be greeting her like this? She extended her arms out and I rose up and we hugged each other. It felt strange, yet so good. Kathy got off her call and asked, "Wow, how did you figure it out so easily?" I wanted to know as well. Maura tapped at my desk and said with a smirk, "Something just clicked when I saw this familiar face." I knew it was my face. I cursed to myself, thinking, without my mask, I'm kryptonite. Our embrace finally came to an end. It looks like we have a lot of catching up to do, but first, let me gather my stuff. I'd hate to forget it all again. She hurried back to her desk, her shiny dark hair bouncing around the top of her head. It looked so cute being tied up like that. She picked up a folder and mentioned some important paperwork that was in it and went on about how her plan was to work remotely for the rest of the week, not wanting to have to come back into the office. She laughed about feeling like such a fool for having to come here after already leaving earlier. Kathy corrected her. "Fool? I'd say you're lucky. Now you get to play catch up." Maura, still bearing her bright smile, quickly went through folders as her questions arose without hesitation. Of course, she asked me about how I was liking my new job. Knowing her, I was going to have to tell her everything. I decided not to shy away, like I had before, so with determination and confidence, I relayed my recent ventures, overselling how great things had been for me. I decided on the best effeminate voice I could muster, while making sure not to overdo it. I explained how I started a job immediately after leaving here, and made up how much work I had been putting into it, and even gave a spiel about how I hardly had time for my creative pursuits. Kathy chimed in with a smirk. Guess who is considering coming back to the office? Maura immediately dropped her folders and looked up at me. Her skirt swished about as she urgently dashed her way back to me. So that's what brings you here. Are you really coming back? She could hardly control her enthusiasm as we embraced each other again. At the moment, I didn't have the heart to tell her I wasn't actually coming back. This is such great news, she said, looking me in the eyes. Why didn't you tell me this right away? I shrugged as she held me in her arms. I never planned on coming back, but at the moment, a door had been opened, so I began to give the idea of stepping through it some consideration. Maura let go, and I smoothed out my dress, careful with all my underskirts as I seated myself with natural ease. I glanced up. Maura stood there, sizing up my outfit. For one thing, I'm really loving this new look. I watched her regard my dress. Her eyes lowered past the hem and grew as they descended upon my sheer legs until reaching my heels. With my feet placed on the floor, I gracefully turned them to reveal they were in fact 4 inches. Her eyes returned to mine. With a charming smirk, she gleefully inquired, "Girl, where are you headed tonight?" I could have played along, relishing in this experience of Maura and me discussing my outfit, but I sat there speechless, coming up empty. Maura, likely observing my pained expression, filled in the stillness. "Oh, that's such a silly question." "Never mind me. You know what the funny thing is? I'm already getting used to your new look." I sat there swiveling gingerly in the chair. She stepped forward and stopped at my side. "Even your hair is styled so well." Was she about to start playing with my dangling curls? She looked at my face. "You even have makeup on, too. You look so pretty." After hearing that, no one would know whether I was wearing an excessive amount of blush or just blushing. In truth, I was loving all this attention from her. I loved hearing her voice, her enthusiasm, and seeing her in person again. I couldn't get over how attracted I was to her presence. It had been such a long time. I adjusted myself in the seat, crossing my legs. That hint of rustle gave away my organza petticoat. "Oh my, you really went all out today. So fancy. You didn't dress up like that just to come here, did you?" I sat there in stunned silence. "Oh, you must have some occasion later?" Kathy commented teasingly, saying I had cancelled my plans. Maura perked up, remarking, "Was it because of the rain?" I tried my best not to squirm in my seat, but my face certainly turned beet red. Kathy returned Maura's question, mentioning that it was the rain and that I had plans in the park, and in jest she said, "But somebody had forgotten their swimsuit." Maura was confused as ever because she wasn't in on the joke. I had to awkwardly explain it all, including the sudden rain, our unexpected encounter, my lame explanations, and my current change of plans. After much of her laughter for my situation, mixed with sympathy, Maura grabbed a chair and sat down beside me. She placed her hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eyes. She gently spoke. "So, I have to ask, and I really don't want to pressure you in any way." She paused as she gently placed her other hand over mine. "Actually, let me be the first to say that you look wonderful, and I totally stand 100% behind any decision you make going forward. Remember, this is about what you want. Just know that I'll be here to make sure everything goes smoothly for you." I knew where this was headed. Of course, I was just cross-dressing and only went out today for my own kicks. I knew I had to step in now and tell her the truth, even though I didn't have an easy way to respond. I thought to myself, how can I put it to her? Maura carried on before I could think of what to say. I mean, I had no clue at all, but that doesn't matter because I want to help you feel comfortable. I want you to truly be who you want to be. Thanks, Maura, but. Before I could respond, she shook her head. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be pressuring you like this. You know what, I totally support this, no question. I'd hate for you to have any situation where you'd feel uncomfortable or take offense in any way. She looked me in the eyes with a concerned look. I mean, I already called you Tim earlier. I really had to tell her now. She had already formed assumptions that simply weren't true, and I needed to clear things up before it would be too late. Just before I attempted to clarify things, she continued. This is so silly of me. Pestering you with all these questions. You shouldn't have to be subjected to this if you don't want to. It should just be like before. I mean, why rush this? There's really no reason to do so. The clarity of the situation I found myself in was spinning around my head, stripping off and falling away. I've gone way beyond what I had set out to do, yet I loved having Maura by my side like this, finding myself in such an intimate situation with her. At last I spoke, keeping up a soft, higher-pitched voice. It's okay, Maura. I have no issue with any questions you have. It's just that. This is all so new to me. I understand. I just want you to know that you'll have me as a friend. One you could always trust. I nodded as we looked at one another, each smiling. I really appreciate that, Maura. Maura continued to chat away after she returned to her desk. At that point, I was about to finish the other half of my sandwich, but instead, I stood up and walked over to join Maura. I decided that I should live up to the pep talk I had earlier, and make those strides in enjoying my situation and embodying my new self. Maura, I said upon approaching, let me help you with your paperwork. She told me to sit and relax, but I insisted, saying enough about me, how are things with you? She mentioned life in the office since I'd been gone, and when she mentioned upcoming events, she made it sound like she expected me to come back. I realized I wasn't of much help, as she danced around me going through folders, trying to juggle the conversation and to get all of the right files in order. I half listened when she got to mentioning stuff about COVID, then she suddenly asked. So just out of curiosity, do you happen to have a name that you go by now? I knew now for sure she thought I was transitioning. I couldn't let this go on anymore. I didn't know how to exactly explain it though. At last I just decided to answer. Tiffany. Ooh, I love it. She turned towards Kathy. Don't you think so? Kathy peered over her monitor. I think it suits you, she said with a wink to me, which reminded me of my similar comment about her outfit earlier today. I know, it's pretty fitting if I say so myself. I'd even go so far as to say it feels like that was your name all along. Tiffany. So much for having to get used to this. My idea for saying Tiffany was to get this over with and let this situation pass. It was just an en-femme name I had considered before, and if I spoke the truth, I'd feel so much more discomfort and have so much more explaining to do. By now Maura's questions became more pointed, because rather than directing them at Tim, the guy who chose to get his kicks by wearing this dress today, her questions were for Tiffany, the proud girl who chose today as her day to embrace her calling. At one point Maura took a brief pause with her filing and presented me with a sincere smile. I returned a smile of my own. The conversation jumped from shopping, some of the stores I frequented, and about the outfits I'd already acquired. Intent on keeping up the idea that I am confident and proud, I uttered with such enthusiasm some of my recent finds. I gave her a more detailed account of how I came across my dress. Maura, fashionable enough to know the brand of dress I had on, was surprised I could even afford it. Then she quickly asserted, "Actually, why couldn't you?" Remembering what I had falsely told her earlier, that I had been quite busy working, aka making money. Maura, quick to grasp my situation, asked me about how I was spending my free time, particularly my nights out. I lied, saying I had no free time these days. She suggested that our office wouldn't work me to death, and she promised that once I returned, she'd take me out for some fun. I latched onto the idea, even insisting on a few places I always had in mind. Maura glanced at the clock and immediately went scrambling through the last of her paperwork, saying that she really had to get going. I excused myself to the bathroom. "Tiffany," Maura called out before I reached the door. I turned to face her. "I just love how much effort you're putting in this. You've got such a classy look, and not only do I think you look great, you seem to be enjoying yourself." I felt I couldn't have said it better myself. I stood there smitten as I swayed my hips a little, and then to my total surprise I held out the skirt of my dress and bent my knees, sweeping one foot behind while dropping into a graceful curtsy. "Thanks, Maura," I replied with a wide smile. It was utter flamboyance, but it was so spontaneous and delightful that I didn't regret it. Upon closing the bathroom door, I stepped back and leaned against it. I thought, was this all really happening to me? I couldn't get over all her praise. More than I've ever experienced from her before. I was loving the situation I found myself in. At this point I realized I had played my part, the role of Tiffany, but if I returned to the office, would I still play this role? In a way it almost seemed ridiculous to come back as Tim. How would I even be able to explain the events of today? If I did return, I only had one choice. The more I thought about my return, the more torn I was, knowing that my change of self had closed an immense gap between Maura and me, a separation I always sought to connect. Yet, I had also created a new tension, one that would pretty much forbid my desired connection I wanted with Maura. Upon returning to get my things and say goodbye, Kathy was on the phone again. Maura was beside her, closely listening in. "Can I please speak with him?" Kathy handed the phone over. Maura told whoever was on the other end that she didn't have time to talk about a project and informed them that someone had returned to the office today and was coming back. "You're not going to believe who it is," Maura exclaimed. I wanted to know who this was directed at. Also, what the hell was she saying? I hadn't really expressed my confirmation in returning to the office. Then I heard the name. It was Brad, of all people. My former co-worker. Just above me on the office ladder. She divulged everything and even informed him that he had to address me as Tiffany. Then it positively hit me, I just got outed. The reality now, if I return to work, is that I would be doing so as my transition self, Tiffany. If only I had told the truth right away. Yet I didn't. Also, could I even keep up the role I've been playing? And if so, for how long? Maura seemed to be getting a load of questions from Brad. I wouldn't dare get on the call if asked. How embarrassing that would be, or even worse, if he were here to see me in my dress and heels. That would provide enough fuel for him to make those blatant comments of his to no end. Talk about someone who likes to hear himself speak. He would mention this to the whole world if he could. The problem was I could already see him letting clients and other acquaintances know about me. First thing out of his mouth, "Did you hear about Tim? It's Tiffany now." I cringed hearing that stupid laugh of his stuck in my head. By the time the call ended, I already had my purse in hand and was about to say goodbye and head out. Maura saw me and asked me to wait so we could leave together. As I stood waiting near the door, Kathy waved goodbye and told me not to forget to call. Maura joined my side, and at last we were on our way out. As we headed down the elevator, I came to grips with how a harmless trip to the post office turned into an outing that I never could have expected. I never thought I'd be coming back to the office, and now I'd be doing so as Tiffany. I wondered if I still had time to return as Tim and clarify the situation, or just not return at all. Then I wouldn't have any explaining to do. I glanced over at Maura and recalled our occasion together in the office. I thought to myself, I could build upon this if I came back. As Tim, I certainly never had an experience like this before, but as Tiffany, things could be so much different. When we stepped outside and hugged each other, Maura said that she would look forward to us working together again. I ran through all the thoughts that had been cycling through my mind. We let go of each other and I looked her in the eyes. I can't wait to see you again. Me too. Bye, Maura. Bye, Tiffany. She turned and hurried down the sidewalk, and I watched her head down most of the block until I lost sight. I headed home, knowing that what I said was indeed true. I would be seeing her again, and I also knew how I would be dressed. Before slipping down into the subway, I stopped myself short and thought, what's the rush to get home? There's still some daylight left. I still had time to enjoy my day in the city as Tiffany. Gone are the days of late morning snoozing, offhandedly tossing on a button-down and pants, and hurriedly racing off to work. Now it's about waking up extra early, ready to fight off the grogginess, and face the daily dilemma of what to wear. It's not all frantic scrambling and hurried choices, but it's still a challenging game of how I choose to showcase the unique blend of confidence and playfulness that defines Tiffany. Today is special. There will be no chaos to this early morning routine. I wanted to make a precise statement, so I've meticulously chosen every piece of my outfit well in advance, having a crystal clear vision of how to style it. But why this special attention? Well, just the other day, Kathy dropped a bombshell. I've been chosen to present our project to a major league company. Upon hearing the news, nerves kicked in like never before. This was uncharted territory for me. In hindsight, it didn't come as a total surprise. With my return to work and a fresh start doing something familiar, coupled with the spark of my new daily rituals, my newfound confidence has skyrocketed. Over the past several weeks, I've elevated my role in the office, no longer confined to being the reliable go-to helper. I said bye-bye to being the task doer for others. Now, I'm at the helm of my own project. To add a delightful twist, it wasn't even my original project. Surprisingly, it belonged to none other than my favorite coworker, Brad. The satisfaction I felt when asked to step in for the presentation was undeniable. The sweet taste of triumph as I watched Brad come to terms with being gracefully stepped over by yours truly. Hardly 2 months in, and the unexpected joys of rising to the occasion and proving that even I can have my day. And with my big meeting today, it's time to shine. My morning ritual kicks off with a refreshing shower, followed by my eagerness to face the mirror. I gracefully sidestep from the glare of light, and once my vision clears, I bask in the glory of my freshly shaved legs, arguably my best asset. Unfortunately, the corporate dress code tends to put a damper on my desire to flaunt them as much as I'd love to. But fear not. Enter my secret weapon, sheer pantyhose, delightfully caressing each leg with a smooth, blissful touch. And here I stand, both metaphorically dipping into my role and literally sliding into a matching bra and panty set. To achieve that desired flatness, I go the extra mile, not only with a girdle but throwing a gaff into the mix. Surprisingly, when it comes to the bra, I ditched any padding, opting for my natural look. Embracing Tiffany isn't just about showcasing my outer transformation, it's a celebration of the genuine self that radiates from within. But let me tell you, the initial face-off with office life was undeniably challenging, especially when I had to do it all decked out as Tiffany. I needed a job, so coming back to the office was an easy choice. But talk about throwing a curveball, and not just at someone else, but at myself as well. Now, I bet you're picturing my grand office comeback as if it were a reel from a slapstick comedy. I can't blame you, you've already seen the prelude of my stepping out, which began with my accidental umbrella stumble, followed in step by a jaw-dropping reveal, a march of confessions gone awry, and an inciting kick of good-natured coercion. Yep, me a plaything for life's torrents. But, let me assure you, it wasn't some hapless series of events. Nope, these were deliberate decisions on my part. I passed through the chaos. I savored the fanciful charm of the entire spectacle. I could have easily taken the reasonable route, and just stuck with being Tim, concocting a plausible explanation for my revelatory office attire that memorable day. But, oh no! I decided to roll the dice and embrace the Tiffany experience. But the reason for doing so wasn't merely a game of playing dress-up. I've learned it's about being ready for any surprising discoveries and open to any new experiences that float my way. I thought the early morning labyrinth of wardrobe challenges was bad, but it was nothing compared to the real obstacle course. I had to navigate through the world of human interactions. A few weeks into my grand office return, the acceptance of my appearance was smooth sailing, but my voice still retained its quirks. My trusty ally? Repetition and persistence. Whether it was genuine improvement or just me growing accustomed to the changes, I couldn't tell. A crucial revelation I gained after slipping into my role: confidence and pride, and there's nothing like a dash of swagger to spice up my transformation. As I pull back the curtain, a cascade of light pours into the room. With a flourish, I throw open the window, taking a deep breath and allowing the pleasant air to swell within. Ah, the change in season: deep spring, verdant, ripe, and unfurling. Leaning against the sill, a dramatic sigh escapes me. My gaze drifts out the window, peering deep into the dingy shadow cast by the neighboring building, a poignant reminder that life isn't always sunshine and rainbows. My memories kicked in and replayed back the times when the struggle was all too real. The times when my mask had to be literally taken off, leaving my face exposed. My confidence had to grapple with the challenge to maintain who I am. In those vulnerable moments, my newfound essence would flutter away like a fleeting ghost, leaving me stripped down to size, contemplating the tempting notion of throwing in the towel. Surrender seemed so easy, allowing Tiffany to retreat to the private realms of the boudoir and bedroom. Yet, I dubbed down, compelling my pride to endure, hoping for a better day. Gradually, I learned to embrace life's ups and downs, riding the exhilarating highs and, of course, bearing those inevitable lows that feel like a punch in the gut. What other choice did I have? The extremes I faced wasted no time presenting themselves. My first day back to the office was a triumph, a glorious moment where I confidently strutted in, eager to redeem myself. My big reveal charged the office atmosphere with a celebratory air. Yet, fate had other plans. My victory lap was cut short later that afternoon. The news descended down on me like crashing water dousing a fire. In just one casual comment, the hopeful sparks of a future with Maura were cruelly extinguished. That's how the news hit me. In the break room, surrounded by the lingering aroma of coffee, I found myself immersed in some delightful late-day chatter with Pam, my new trusty office companion. In the midst of our sips and giggles, in sauntered a group of colleagues led by none other than Maura, bearing a tray loaded with cupcakes and a sparkle in her eye. "Here, Tiffany, For your special day. I had been secretly anticipating this moment, having caught wind of a special delivery in the works. As the applause settled down, I seized the opportunity to shower Maura with compliments. My words enveloped like a forest fire of sweltering praise for her thoughtful and considerate nature. With a hefty bite of the cupcake, I managed to squeeze in, between mouthfuls, a masterpiece. Maura! You've truly outdone yourself. Pam, with her sensible bites, chimed in with her own praises, acknowledging the delightful taste and texture. This, of course, prompted Maura to divulge some of the secret combinations of ingredients. Soon, the room buzzed with everyone tossing in their guesses or sharing their own go-to choices. While I listened, I could practically feel my impending sugar rush approaching. In my blissful cupcake reverie, it was now others' turn to shower Maura with compliments. Pam kicked things off, expressing her gratitude and deeming it a kind gesture. Grinning wildly, my mouth still filled with cupcake, I couldn't resist injecting a playful correction. Sweet gesture, you meant sweet gesture. Laughter and playful jeers ensued, and Maura's eyes twinkled with joy in the center of it all. With a delightful touch of giddiness, she exclaimed, "Tiffany! Sweet gesture? That's hilarious." Last night at my place, when Gary and I were taste testing the cupcakes, he said the exact same thing. The name Gary landed on me like a deluge of water, extinguishing my pyre of love. The only thing left was the name sizzling through my ears. Caught completely off guard, the word escaped my lips with a volume I hadn't intended. Gary? Maura, seemingly oblivious to the bucket of water she had just dropped on me, responded cheerfully, "Yeah, Gary, my boyfriend." "Oh, right, you might not know. We've been together for a few months now." I had been extinguished, yet oddly, I managed to remain seated there, absorbing Maura's deep dive into the intricacies of her relationship. The remainder of my cupcake remained lodged in my mouth as I struggled to swallow. My head embarked on a wild 180-degree spin, grappling with this unexpected new reality. Sure, the news hit me like an unscripted hook, pulling me off the stage on what was meant to be my celebratory day. But, in a strange way, it served as a well-deserved reality check. In light of my freshly embraced identity, I realized I needed to come to terms with the impracticality of my romantic dreams involving Maura. Surprisingly, the art of letting go didn't involve much heartache. Acknowledging the futility of clutching onto a romantic fantasy, I pivoted my focus and energy. Instead, I discovered solace in the realization that spending time with Maura could still be immensely enjoyable. Little did I know, it turned out even better than what I had imagined. I unshackled myself from the chains of love-induced obsession, opting instead for a natural bond that could only flourish. Now, I declare Maura and me as besties. As I immersed myself in this thrilling escapade of dress-up, a gentle wave of emotions and dreamy vibes enveloped me. An undeniable craving lingered in the air, urging me to make today nothing short of extraordinary. My hair, patiently coiled up in curlers, whispered promises of graceful cascades, eagerly anticipating its liberation for the final, enchanting touches of styling magic. Getting ahead of myself, the promise of putting on my makeup was also getting to my head. I nestled into a cozy spot before the mirror, prepared to dive into the next act. As I cast a thoughtful glance at the reflection staring back at me, I had a realization that every element was already in place. I wasn't altering myself, I was merely enhancing the canvas that is my identity. I skillfully applied foundation, creating a flawless base that set the stage, then a delicate touch of blush added a rosy glow to my cheeks, enhancing my overall radiance. With each patient brush stroke, I meticulously traced my eyes with eyeliner, adding a subtle wing for that touch of flair. Mascara worked its magic on my lashes, subtly accentuating their length and volume. I didn't stop until I was convinced my efforts were flutter-worthy. As the ensemble neared its desired perfection, my eyes fixated on a pair of earrings, and a capricious idea struck me. Not initially part of my well-crafted vision and appearing rather basic at first glance, I adorned myself with these deceptively simple gems. To my surprise, they unleashed a brilliant sparkle, a small detail casting an enchanting spell and effortlessly becoming the perfect complement to the day's look. Now, the spotlight was on one of my all-time favorite rituals, the lipstick affair. I selected a shade of nude pink and puckered up, and planted a glamorous kiss towards the other side of the mirror. My mission? To achieve that almost effortlessly natural yet subtly glossy look on my lips. After all, why not let my lips exude that irresistibly kissable appeal? With excitement bubbling within me, I eagerly stood up, ready to finally slip into my carefully chosen outfit. As I unfurled it and laid it out on the bed, a reflective moment washed over me. I couldn't help but acknowledge the journey I've traversed in the vast realm of office wear, where my natural inclinations often clashed with the mundane reality of corporate attire. In my daydreams, I've envisioned myself waltzing into the office donned in a glamorous cocktail dress or a sweeping, elegant gown. You know, the ones I cherish, those that turn heads. However, everyday reality tends to lean towards the drab, occasionally a tad too masculine, swaying uncomfortably towards the strictly business look, an apt term that aligns with Kathy's preferred style. But today, as I gracefully slipped into my skirt, the smooth satin interior gliding along my sheer legs felt like indulging in a luxurious secret. I've come to realize that some suits, when worn with a confident swagger in my step, could go a long way. Tucking in the crisp white blouse and cinching the waistline, I expertly reached behind to zip it shut. One arm after another, my jacket seamlessly joined the ensemble, a couple of buttons, and voila! The transformation was complete. This dress suit was special. Formal and business-ready, yet with a distinct feminine spark, a touch of flair, the eye-catching lavender hue and dazzling print was simply irresistible. As I admired myself in the mirror, a playful thought cheekily crossed my mind. Who says you can't infuse a bit of that chic spirit into the professional arena? Heck, I thought, this ensemble could be a true contender. It could even compete with my flirtiest party dresses. My outfit was a victory statement. However, I knew better than to let the dazzling lavender hues get to my head. The real challenge? Could Tiffany live up to the allure of this outfit? Luckily, my mantra these days is game on. It didn't take much time before I seamlessly integrated myself into the office world. Game on had become my common utterance each morning as I stepped in as Tiffany, and I couldn't be happier. Yet, always there on the horizon, a crucial decision loomed ahead, a decision I couldn't avoid any longer. I had to come out full-time. I relished the Tiffany experience outside the office. Was it even a surprise? At first, delicate decisions were made about when to choose Tiffany. Tim was always used for scenarios I wasn't ready to confront head-on. The intricate dance of swaying between these two identities naturally gave way in a matter of weeks. The scales tipped in Tiffany's favor, and my decision crystallized. Encounters with neighbors became more frequent, presenting perfect opportunities to confidently introduce myself as Tiffany. This same approach extended to familiar faces I'd encounter while out for a drink or a bite to eat at one of my regular haunts. As conversations deepened, so did the disclosure of Tiffany's experiences. The perfect stage for my grand statement? A Kentucky Derby viewing party, of course. As soon as the invite landed in my inbox, my mind sparked with visions of the most darling dress and a fancy hat, perfectly aligning with the expected fancy dress attire. However, a hint of worry crept in as I eyed the guest list, contemplating the reactions of friends and acquaintances. The idea of such a bold step seemed too overwhelming of an undertaking, so I snuffed it out. After a few days, memories of attending the same event last year as a guy and what it entailed resurfaced, and upon further reflection it dawned on me that this year presented an irresistible opportunity to showcase and exude some genuine derby charm. Gradually, the initial trepidation melted away as I warmed up to the idea. With careful precision, I dropped a few hints to my closest friends, playfully preparing them for the impending grand revelation of the fabulousness that is Tiffany. Determined not to disappoint, I approached my grand entrance and coming out moment with pride. Every detail was meticulously planned for this climactic display: a magnificent dress, tailored to accentuate every curve, and a hat that embodied the epitome of derby chic, adorned with vibrant colors and a touch of whimsy. Stepping into the scene, I transformed into a beacon of regard, moving with refined grace, greeting everyone with an air of confidence. I quickly became the talk of the party, maybe even leaving a few attendees green with envy. If anything, my coming out would be etched in the memories of derby parties to come. Navigating the sea of faces, both familiar and new, proved somewhat overwhelming. However, as the dust settled, the experience revealed itself to be incredibly rewarding. A massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders, turning my coming out into a liberating and affirming experience. It's rather amusing to reflect on the fact that just a year ago, I was one of the guys at these events, passionately diving into spirited debates about the best horses, optimal betting strategies, and all the ways we were either making a fortune or, more likely, losing it. Fast forward to this year, post my center stage moment, and I found myself observing them from a distance while mostly immersed in lively conversations with the girls. Racing banter took a back seat, making only fleeting appearances, if any at all. Our conversations now orbited around relationships, boyfriends, the allure of our fabulous outfits, and the charming guys gathered in our midst. Many were eager to share tales of triumphs and, more often, the comedic struggles in the tumultuous realm of dating. Diving headfirst into the lively discussions, I immediately found myself confronted by a noticeable gap in my own experiences. When probed about my own dating tales, my response was like a blank canvas, met with surprised expressions and curious stares. I had so little to contribute. I had to reckon with the stark reality of my lack of interest in dating and the bleak prospects for my own romantic pursuits. It was something I needed to face up to and was willing to explore. Ooh, I couldn't help but exclaim, the moment had finally arrived for my hair. One curler after another, my curls cascaded and danced in a way that truly enchanted me. A tad longer these days, I felt I've reached that sweet spot long enough to dangle past my ears but not quite enough to grace my shoulders. Aiming for a playful, carefree vibe, I meticulously brushed it up, ensuring it maintained its perky demeanor. I glanced at the clock and swiftly slipped on my lavender heels, relishing the rare treat they offered, a perfect complement to my ensemble. While practical dark flats were my usual go-to, today demanded something special, a day to conquer while proudly flaunting my fabulous heels. The finishing touch to my ensemble? A matching lavender mask, a purchase made without hesitation as I contemplated the entirety of my dress suit. With a flourish, I threw it on and secured it in place, and with every confident step, I stepped out the door with a swagger, the lavender heels clicking with determination on the pavement. As I strolled down the street, a beaming smile graced my face, a sight that demanded to be seen. I didn't want to wear this mask. I wanted to proudly smile at every person I passed, but I did my next best option. I made eye contact and nodded. The playful sway of my hair did the saying hi, and my swagger mirrored the upbeat rhythm of my heartbeat. I wasn't just ready for the day, I was armed with confidence, accompanied by an unapologetic splash of fabulousness, more than enough to conquer the day. Entering the office, you wouldn't guess it was a Monday, not with the lively energy bubbling inside me, practically spilling into the air. My gaze naturally found Maura, perched at her desk, not fully immersed in the work routine yet still caught in the act of morning unwinding. Despite the impending meeting and the sensible knowledge that I should dive into presentation reviews, a brief detour for some friendly chit-chat never hurt anyone. Armed with the notes I had prepared, neatly filed away in my trusty folder, I strolled over to Maura's desk, attempting to exude an air of casual confidence. "Hi, Maura. How was your weekend?" Her gaze shifted from my face to my outfit, and her eyes immediately lit up. "Tiffany! Oh, look at you. Absolutely fantastic. Today's the big meeting, right?" "Well, if everyone keeps reminding me about it, it will only make me even more nervous than I already am," I replied, revealing my underlying trepidation. Maura teased, "Oh, you shouldn't be nervous. I'm sure you've got some tricks up your sleeve." Leaning in conspiratorially, I shared, "My trick is simple. Some choose confidence, others go for flair. I just throw on a whole lot of lavender." She chuckled, pinching at the sleeve of my suit. "Seems to work like a charm." "Thanks, Maura. But enough about my meeting. Please, tell me about your weekend?" "Oh, it was good, you know. Spent some quality time with Gary," she replied, a contented smile gracing her face. "Ah, Gary. The man of the hour," I said, placing my folder on her desk. Grabbing a spare chair, I settled in beside her. "You two really are a power couple." "I'm so jealous," I teased, letting my playful tone add to the ongoing banter about him, a perk that I've found I quite fancy. Maura, fully accustomed to my cheeky remarks, chuckled along. "Come on, Tiffany. You'd be the last person I'd expect to try and steal him away from me." Laughing, I feigned innocence. "I know, right, me? Never. Plus, I'd stand no chance, considering it's smooth sailing with you two." I prodded, leaning in, playfully jabbing at her. Maura steered the conversation into deeper waters, revealing the intricacies of her time with Gary. As I opened my folder and perused my materials, she confessed facing challenges. My file slipped from my hands as I transformed into an attentive listener, nodding sympathetically. She lamented the lack of quality time with him due to his friends frequently getting in the way. In true form, my natural inclination couldn't be restrained for long. I couldn't resist injecting a touch of playfulness into the discussion. "Well, you know, I'm also learning not all guys are as amazing as they first seem," I said with a sly grin, subtly hinting at my own preferences. Maura raised an intrigued eyebrow. "Really? Do tell." Unable to resist the opportunity to spin a playful tale, I chuckled and adopted a mysterious air. Truth be told, I didn't have a specific story in mind. I just got a kick out of this type of banter. "Oh, you know, the usual. Some guys just can't grasp the fabulousness we bring into their lives. It's a shame, really." "You mean you haven't found anyone instantly swayed by your charm?" Leaning in with a smirk, I whispered conspiratorially in her ear, "Oh, you don't want to make things too easy for them. They've got their own work to do, right?" "You've got a point there. Maybe I need to take a leaf out of your book and find someone who appreciates fabulousness." In a way, Maura was onto something. She deserves someone who genuinely values her. Despite my lack of expertise in the realm of relationships and my cluelessness about guys, here I was, exchanging relationship wisdom with her anyway. Maura subtly steered our conversation, bringing up lingering disappointment from our recent girls' nights out, which prompted her concern for me as she reminisced about my unlucky night. The evening had unfolded in a whirlwind of drinks, dance, and a dash of flirtation, yet no numbers were exchanged, and I found myself heading home solo once again. Oddly enough, I didn't mind. My solitary ride home was a deliberate and comforting choice. Ironically, had you glimpsed me earlier that night, you might think otherwise. Not even tipsy yet, the girls and I enthusiastically dived into my newfound passion, discussing boys. I shamelessly declared my urgent desire for their attention. Beyond the joy of flaunting a stunning outfit, these candid admissions and the playful art of flirting had evolved into the highlights of my evenings. Another delightful revelation was the anticipation of what might unfold next. Despite the tempting allure for things to escalate, I found contentment in keeping it all within the playful realm of delightful banter. Yet, I can't deny that these girls' nights out are gradually warming me up to the idea of dipping my toes into the dating scene. It could be the magnetic pull of an unpredictable adventure that beckons me, or perhaps it's rooted in the longings for love that have lingered unfulfilled for far too long. In an attempt to steer the conversation back into playful waters, I let out a melodramatic sigh and casually rested my hand on Maura's shoulder. With theatrical flair, I declared, "Well, there is only one key to happiness. You just have to find Mr. Right." We both shared a momentary heartfelt sigh, only to burst into laughter as we discussed the reality of that quest, a pursuit that seemed potentially impossible. "Scratch that," I said, standing up, folder in hand. "Maybe it's more about focusing on what makes you happy, without the need for a Mr. Right." When Maura met my eyes, a mischievous twinkle in my eye sparkled. I couldn't resist adding, "And if that involves going for the money, well, why not?" Maura, caught in a fit of laughter that rendered her nearly speechless, managed to respond amid giggles, "You're speaking the absolute truth, Tiffany. Where do I find one of those golden tickets?" I let her question fade into the air, our matching smirks and light-hearted camaraderie lingering as I gracefully made my way back to my desk, savoring the shared moment of playful complicity. Time with Maura was undeniably the highlight of my day. Though any romantic notions had been cast aside, a lingering thought occasionally twirled in the recesses of my mind. Deep down, the idea still held a faint glimmer of possibility. Yet, in the current circumstances, I didn't dare make a move, unwilling to jeopardize the delightful camaraderie we shared. Back at my desk, I found myself fully immersed in contemplation, skillfully navigating the intricate landscape of romance that surrounded me or, to be honest, the lack thereof. The lingering question echoed in my mind, where to go from here? Interacting with fellow female colleagues, like Pam and others, stirred similar feelings, as if treading on delicate ground and risking the budding connections of our girlfriend relationships. Venturing beyond the office walls, pleasant conversations with friends and acquaintances ensued, but the once familiar magnetic pull was noticeably absent. Something had shifted. It felt like I had entered a romantic limbo, caught between the yearning for a genuine connection and the elusive spark that seemed to be slipping away. Yet, don't assume that my preferences now exclusively sway toward men. My time as Tiffany, and the adventures and girls' nights out, haven't conjured up some miraculous transformation. I just happily embrace it, relishing the perks of these new experiences. Nevertheless, there's a certain intangibility. I have no intended targets. Within the office walls and beyond, a few acquaintances may have lured me into some playful flirting, and sure, I wouldn't mind getting to know them better. However, for me, it's more about the allure and the exhilarating thrill of these interactions, like dancing on the edge. I'm not about to dive into the deep end or anything like that. I found myself back at my desk once more, but this time armed with a glass of water, having left my coffee in the break room. The caffeine seemed to be doing the exact opposite of alleviating the pre-meeting jitters. I nervously noted the time. In the distance, Kathy's voice cut through the air, prompting me to swivel around in my seat. Nervous? She inquired upon approach. Oh, please don't remind me, I replied with a huff, feeling like everyone was conspiring to exploit my nerves, akin to breaking open a jar of butterflies just to watch the kaleidoscope of fluttering chaos. Kathy stepped beside me, and as I looked up, she smiled, placing her hand reassuringly on my shoulder. Well, it's only natural to feel that way, but remember, we all have faith in you. That's why we put you in this position. I can't believe it. I'm genuinely sorry about the last-minute decision to have you step up for this. But Tiffany, you're doing a fantastic job. Kathy's words carried a warmth that I appreciated and needed right now. Kathy, you're too kind. But honestly, I owe you many thanks for this pivotal decision. Thank me? You should be thanking Bryce. He was the one who insisted on you doing this. Bryce Garland? Really? Tiffany, bosses don't always know best, but in this case, he hit the nail on the head. That's why we had you take over the project the other week. That's what I was curious about. Am I heading the project now too? Of course you are. You really think you're still only assisting Brad? Wasn't that the plan? Oh, come on. Look at what you've accomplished since taking over. Brad stepped in for someone earlier on, so why not you now? Things certainly seem to be falling into place. Yeah, I guess. Guess? Tiffany, Bryce believed you'd be the best to handle this, especially because Jeffrey Samuel would be directly involved. I sprung up from my chair, almost grabbing Kathy in exasperation. Jeffrey Samuel? The head of Omniscape Initiative? That's right. But involved how? My words stumbled out in a mix of surprise and excitement as I found my legs wobbling, struggling to stand up straight. He's sitting in on the review. In fact, he'll oversee the decision. He'll be here. Are you serious? Kathy placed her hand on my shoulder in a supportive gesture. We couldn't afford to let this slip away. That's why we got you on board to make it happen. But I thought they'd send his associates for a meeting like this. My legs stabilized, but I began breathing heavily, trying my best to compose myself. Nope. This one is a huge deal. It's the Cosmea project, maybe just another thing for them, but likely our biggest transaction of the year. The revelation hung in the air as I contemplated the surprise attendee. I felt the beckoning call to action and shot a glance at Kathy. The kindling red curls in her hair seemed to resonate with my forging resolve. Now that I think about it, I realize what you mean. Brad would be a disaster today. Shoo, speak of the devil, here he comes now. Brad chuckled well before his approach, indicating he had likely rehearsed his incoming comments. Tiffany, there you are. He stepped before us. Nervous much? Kathy and I exchanged knowing and disdained glances, bracing ourselves for the predictable and unfunny banter from Brad. And, true to form, there it was. Well, you really look like it, he said, letting out a heaving laugh. Kathy, much to my chagrin, excused herself, leaving me alone to soak in his company. I'm fine, Brad, I answered without looking at him. Well, look at you. I guess you can step up to the plate once in a while. Right? I didn't bother with any banter and just eyed him with a glaring look. He stepped back, sizing up my outfit. Oh, I see you're trying to suck up to Jeffrey Samuel, huh? Let's hope your presentation is a knockout like your outfit. Rolling my eyes, with no intention of letting Brad rattle me, I muttered, Thanks for the encouragement, Brad. I'll keep it in mind as I dazzle the room. In the presence of Brad, a rare smirk emerged on my face. He continued to chuckle still from his remark. Unfazed, I hatched my own plan for the meeting, something that would inject an element of surprise. My demeanor perked up. Brad, I can still let you help with the presentation if you want. Well, I'd certainly step in if you find yourself in a bind. With a playful glint in my eye, I wanted to test Brad's willingness. No, I mean right away. Well, sure, but with what? We need to start with a good impression. In fact, I'll be chit-chatting with Jeffrey right before the meeting, using a little charm to spark things. You know, dazzle him. You'll be there to attend to anyone's needs. What? I threw in with a sly grin, wondering if he'd take the bait. Oh, Brad, I know what, I'll have you ask Jeffrey how he likes his coffee, and you can make it and bring it back to him. Wouldn't that be nice? What? But that's not my job? He was clearly rattled. The tides were turning. I chuckled loudly, almost wishing Kathy were around to share the moment with. Oh, Brad, you thought I was being serious. Well, it doesn't seem too far-fetched, so I get what you mean. It's also a thoughtful gesture. Don't you think so? Tell you what, I'll just be in my office, and you can call on me if you need a hand. Oh, Brad, you're a real treat. Thanks, I'm sure I can handle all this fine. You do your thing in your office. I flashed him a playful smile. Well, I expect to keep myself busy there. But of course, if you need a hand, I'll be on standby. Ooh, Brad, my standby. I held my hand to my heart and struck a dramatic pose. Oh, I just love it. I'd shower you with kisses right now, but I don't have time. My empowered self needs to shine, so please let me get back to an uninterrupted run-through of my notes. I sat down, making it look like I was already engrossed in my work. Brad took the hint and began his walk away, calling back. Okay, I'm sure you'll do fine. I looked up, half acknowledged him, and flickered my fingers before he turned. Thanks, Brad, toodaloo. A wry grin played on my lips as I basked in my apparent dressing down of Brad. The office buzzed with excitement, congratulations, and a sprinkle of envy as my presentation hit the bullseye. Word spread like wildfire. The Cosmia project, now ours, had Jeffrey Samuel singing praises and offering full-throated endorsements. Just like that, we firmly gripped the most significant proposal of the year. The air crackled with accomplishment, setting the stage for my victory lap. Just earlier, after handshakes and goodbyes, I stole a brief moment in the bathroom, savoring success in quiet reflection. Now, returning to my desk, Maura intercepted me with an exuberant hug. Tiffany, this is incredible. I heard you knocked it out of the park. Grinning ear to ear, Maura and I reveled in a victorious embrace. I replied, well, someone had to. As we lingered in our triumph, Brad shuffled past, mustering a half-hearted acknowledgement of his role in the project. Maura and I disengaged, and Brad threw in a good job, arms outstretched, as if expecting an embrace. In the distance, Kathy chimed in with praise, Tiffany. Just as expected. I breezed past Brad's hanging gesture, veering straight toward Kathy. Game changer for the whole team. Great job. Our hug sealed the sentiment, and I showered her with thanks. From across the room, a jubilant voice declared, You killed it, Tiffany. A cheer erupted, Go, go Cosmia. In classic fashion, Brad couldn't resist and hovered nearby, cheekily adding, Here's Tiffany, our golden child. Basking in the afterglow of triumph, I beamed at the diverse reactions and playfully sidled up to Brad. "Thanks, everyone!" And a special shout-out to Brad. A smile formed on his face as I paused for dramatic effect. In my Reliant style, I gladly seized his offer to take the reins. Another pause as I surveyed the entire room. Let's make the Cosmia project a masterpiece. Possibly, my statement both figuratively and literally ended Brad's career. There he stood, frozen in dumb shock, as the room sustained its buzz with excitement. The tables had turned, and it was time for Brad to finally feel the weight of his past actions, reminiscent of the days when he used to put me down. Despite the accomplishments, I felt somewhat overwhelmed, which directed me to pay Maura a visit. Seizing a chair, I joined her, and she effortlessly consoled my feelings while showering praise on the hard work I had invested. Gratitude poured forth in our exchange. While I had initially hoped to steer the conversation toward weekend plans, shopping escapades, or even boys, Maura kept the spotlight firmly on the project. "So, when does the groundbreaking begin?" Maura asked with eager anticipation. "Well, the next critical steps are a bit down the road." Thank God, I could use a breather. "Oh, I do have a quick follow-up meeting this Thursday." "A follow-up meeting?" Maura curiously questioned. "Is it paperwork stuff at their office?" "Nope, it's at the Jasmine." "The Jasmine?" Maura's eyes widened with intrigue. Pam, who sat nearby, caught wind of the mention and hustled over to join the conversation. "Yeah, well, Jeffrey suggested it." Maura's eyes widened with realization, a playful smirk surfacing as she connected the dots. "With just him?" I nodded. "Yeah. Tiffany. The Jasmine. It's one of the fanciest places in town. It's nothing but exquisite." Pam chimed in. "Are you sure this is going to be a follow-up meeting about the project?" Maura asked, a glimmer in her eyes. "Well, of course it is. Besides, why not a fancy place? You know that Jeffrey has a thing for fine food." It was one of our early talking points before we got into the details of the project. But what's there to follow up on? Besides him getting to know you better. The playful glint in Maura's eyes doubled down. Pam chimed in, clearly amused. "Yeah, Tiffany, this sounds like a date." I was taken aback as I came to terms with what they were suggesting. Embarrassment grew along with my realization I had just figured it out. For the first time, a guy had offered me to go on a date with him. Despite this groundbreaking moment, I still wasn't quite convinced. "Girls, it's around lunchtime even during office hours. I don't care what you think, this will be strictly business, trust me." Pam grinned at Maura. "All right, let's just call it a lunch date then." Maura playfully added, "One where very important business matters will be discussed." The girls giggled in gleeful complicity. Feeling somewhat flustered and in need of input, I glanced up at Pam and then leaned towards Maura. I was hoping that would be the case. "Now you're making me not so sure about this." Maura's grin turned to surprise, picking up on my expression. "Tiffany? Didn't you always declare your longing for something exactly like this? I mean, I'm not sure where all this extra concern is coming from." She exchanged a knowing glance with Pam, and they nodded in tandem. Maura focused back on me. "Tiffany, stick to his offer." "But what if his intentions are otherwise? What should I do?" "Tiffany," she said with a gasp. "Come on, have fun and just enjoy it." Pam chimed in. "Yeah, Tiffany, just go." Maura held onto my shoulders and locked eyes with me. You deserve it after today's success. I shrugged, reluctantly agreeing. Okay. If you say so. Just like that, no dazzling flirtations over drinks or flaunting my fabulous self on the dance floor at a club. Surprisingly, it happened right in the office. That's where I got offered my first date from a guy. Maura gave me a sly smirk, and with my undivided attention, she teased, "Looks like you're living up to your own advice." Own advice? I inquired, joined by Pam, who was equally curious. Maura chuckled, "Yeah, just like what you said earlier. Life's about doing what makes you happy, you know? Going for the money." She smirked, and my mouth dropped open. Maura! I beamed at her. How dare you suggest such a thing? Then, I smirked, and in my fabulous way, I added, "What can I say? Not only do I speak the truth, sometimes I like to live it."